Nietzsche never wrote to comfort hearts, but to strip them of their illusions. Love, so celebrated as something pure and elevated, in his view was pierced by much darker forces: instinct, power, desire for possession, and fear of solitude. What if what we call loving were, in truth, a way of disguising our craving for control? What if the promise of eternity hid merely a contract of convenience? Nietzsche provokes us to look into the abyss of human affection without veils, to face the rawness of desire and dependency that we call love. Instead of seeing it as a fairy tale, he invites us to perceive the game of forces, the struggle between freedom and submission, between surrender and dominion. This reflection may be uncomfortable, but also liberating. Are you prepared to discover if what you feel is love or merely a reflection of your own will to power? If this provocation echoes within you, subscribe and follow this journey through Nietzsche's thought, because love perhaps has never been what you believed it to be. Nietzsche distrusted everything that men called noble, elevated, or pure. For him, behind beautiful words always hid raw and less confessible forces. Love was no exception. Long before being sung in verses or transformed into a promise of eternity, love is, according to Nietzsche, the masked expression of instinct. It is not the heart that guides passion, but the body, with its desires for perpetuation, possession, and domination. Romanticism for him was nothing more than a poetic varnish to cover the biological and tragic truth of life. When someone says, "I love you," they rarely perceive that this declaration carries more necessity than generosity. We love because we need, because the other completes us in our deficiency, because we see in them an extension of ourselves, a mirror that confirms our existence. Love, in this sense, would not be altruism, but a refined form of selfishness. We desire the other as we desire food, not to elevate them, but to nourish our own continuity. Nietzsche invites us to observe the brutality behind affection. Passion is merely a sophisticated strategy of life to perpetuate itself. Imagine two people who meet and fall in love. To common eyes, it will appear a magical encounter, destiny, poetic chance. But for Nietzsche, this magnetism is nothing more than disguised instinct. They are bodies that recognize each other, forces that seek to combine, an invisible game of biology expressing itself under the garb of romance. What we call love is nothing more than life-demanding continuity, making us believe that emotion is choice, when, in reality, it is nature's imposition. This perspective may seem cruel, but it is precisely there that the strength of Nietzschean thought resides, tearing off the masks that prevent us from seeing. By stripping love of its ornaments, Nietzsche does not want to destroy it, but free us from the illusion that loving is a divine, disinterested, or immaculate act. To love is human, all too human. It is flesh, desire, instinct. It is will to live that disguises itself as poetry. This vision also explains why love so often mixes with jealousy, fear of loss, need for control. If love were pure, if it were truly altruistic, there would be no pain of possession, nor despair in the face of betrayal. But since love is born from the instinct of survival and domination, every threat to the loving bond awakens in us the same terror as the threat of death. It is as if life, through the other, were at stake. We love because we cannot bear the void, because the other anchors us before the abyss of solitude. Nietzsche saw in this a trap. Romanticism convinces us that loving is to elevate ourselves, when in truth, loving is to bow before the force of instinct. We love less because we choose, and more because we are chosen by life itself. Our affections are less an expression of freedom than of necessity. Love is not an invention of the soul, but an imposition of the flesh. And here lies the provocative point. If love is disguised instinct, what remains of what we call true feeling? Are we not spending our entire lives believing in a poetic lie just to bear the brutal reality of desire? Nietzsche forces us to face this uncomfortable mirror. Instead of seeing love as a gift, we should see it as a strategy of life. It is not about condemning the feeling, but understanding it in its raw essence, without illusions. Now imagine your own love stories. How many times did you believe you were facing something eternal, sublime, almost sacred? And how many times, looking back, did you perceive that what moved you was fear of solitude, the will to possess, the need to be recognized? This perception does not diminish love, but puts it in perspective. It ceases to be an untouchable mystery and reveals itself as part of our struggle for survival and affirmation. Nietzsche does not invite us to reject love, but to understand it. Only when we accept that it is masked instinct can we see its limits and traps. Loving can be beautiful, but not because it is pure, but because it is human. And the human, for Nietzsche, is always a mixture of grandeur and misery, of strength and fragility. By dismantling the illusion of love as elevated virtue, Nietzsche opens the door to transformative thinking. If love is nothing more than a mask of instinct, then true freedom begins when we remove that mask. The question is, do we have the courage to look at desire without veils? If at first glance Nietzsche showed us that love is, in essence, disguised instinct, at this moment he invites us to see how culture transformed this instinct into something sublime, almost sacred. Love, which is born from biology, was polished by centuries of poetry, religion and morality until it became what we call romance. Desire was converted into a promise of eternity, the need for possession became a vow of fidelity, and dependence was adorned with words like destiny and soulmate. Nietzsche did not deny the force of culture, but warned of the danger of the illusions it creates. Romanticism, in his view, was not just a literary style, but a mechanism for sweetening the brute reality of existence. Poets, priests, moral philosophers, all collaborated to build the image of love as something pure, elevated, and capable of redeeming life. This cultural invention, however, served less to illuminate and more to put to sleep. Romantic love, with its aura of transcendence, distanced us from the uncomfortable truth that, deep down, we love out of necessity and instinct. Think about how we grew up hearing stories of eternal love. From children's tales to popular songs, we are always told the idea that there exists someone destined for us, a lost half that completes us. This narrative creates enchantment, but also a prison. Those who believe they will only be complete when finding the right person carry within themselves eternal dissatisfaction, a void that never fills completely. Culture makes us believe that love is the key to happiness, when for Nietzsche, this promise is nothing but illusion. Religion played a fundamental role in this construction. Marriage, for example, ceased to be merely a social contract and became a sacrament, a sacred commitment before God. Conjugal love was elevated to the condition of virtue, and sexual desire, by itself, was frequently condemned as sin. The union between man and woman then became simultaneously refuge and prison. Nietzsche saw in this another mechanism of domestication, transforming instinct into morality, controlling bodies and disciplining desires under the disguise of love. It is no wonder that for him, romantic poetry had something deceptive. By transforming passion into eternity, poets created expectations that real life could never sustain. To love in this discourse seemed to be something immaculate, when in truth it was made of jealousy, insecurities, and need for domination. Romanticism promised transcendence, but delivered frustration. And frustration, according to Nietzsche, is born precisely from the discrepancy between life as it is and life as we would like it to be. This cultural invention of romantic love brought us profound consequences. It shaped how we relate, how we choose partners, how we suffer when we are abandoned. Culture taught us to expect from love something it cannot offer: completeness. When the other does not correspond to our expectations, we believe we have failed or that we still have not found true love. But, in Nietzsche's view, the error is not in the experience, but in the illusion we created about it. A simple example: think of how many people remain in unhappy relationships just because they believe love must resist everything, that giving up is failure, that being alone is a sign of defeat. This belief does not arise from instinct, but from the cultural invention that convinces us that love is sacred. Nietzsche saw in this insistence a symptom of slavery. We do not love the other, but the idea of love that was imposed upon us. It is at this point that Nietzschean thought becomes liberating. By dismantling the romantic illusion, he does not want to steal life's enchantment, but return us to reality. Loving does not need to be eternal, nor pure, nor sacred. Loving can be just encounter, intensity, momentary creation. The problem is not love itself, but the lie that surrounds it. Culture promised us emotional paradises, but life only delivers instants. What we do with these instants is what defines our strength. Nietzsche challenges us then to abandon the easy comfort of illusion. The greatness of the human being does not lie in waiting for perfect love, but in bearing the imperfection of affections without losing oneself in it. Instead of seeking the soulmate, we should seek the courage to live without guarantees. Instead of believing in eternal promises, we should learn to value the instant, the encounter, the now. If love is cultural invention, it is up to us to decide what to do with it. We can continue prisoners of the romantic illusion, or we can, as Nietzsche suggests, face love as what it really is: a game of forces, a risk, a human experience made of beauty and pain. The question is, are we prepared to love without lies? Nietzsche did not see love merely as instinct or cultural illusion, but as one of the most intense forms in which the will to power manifests itself. For him, everything in life is struggle, tension, conflict of forces that seek to affirm themselves. Love, so exalted as surrender, does not escape this logic. At its root, it is will to dominate, to mold the other, to transform them into an extension of oneself. Behind the sweetness of loving gestures pulses a deep desire for possession. When someone says, "I love you," they are often saying, without realizing, "I want you to belong to me. I want you to be my mirror. I want your life to revolve around mine." Love, far from being only donation, is also appropriation. We want to be unique to the other. We want exclusivity. We want to guarantee that no one else occupies that space we judge ours by right. To love is, in this sense, an act of power, even if masked as care and affection. Nietzsche provokes us to see the contradiction. We proclaim that loving is desiring the other's happiness, but we suffer profoundly when this happiness no longer depends on us. If the beloved finds joy outside our presence, we feel jealousy, anger, resentment. This reveals that love is rarely pure altruism. To love is to desire the other, but above all to desire that they desire us back. It is wanting to be necessary, indispensable, irreplaceable. It is transforming the other into part of our own existence. This movement, for Nietzsche, shows how much love is a battlefield. Two individuals enter into relation, but their forces do not meet in harmony. They fight, dispute, mold each other mutually. To love is always to try to imprint on the other the mark of our own will. We want the beloved to see us as center, to think like us, to choose what we desire, to live according to our expectations. Even the most tender gestures carry this seed of power. Think of a couple that meets and begins to build a life together. At first, there is passion, enchantment, desire for proximity, or But little by little attempts at molding arise. One asks the other to change certain habits, another demands exclusivity in certain situations. Both begin to create small rules to preserve the relationship. Behind each request, there is an attempt to dominate. Love in this scenario is negotiation of forces, never complete peace. Nietzsche reminds us that this should not be seen as perversion or failure, but as the natural condition of human affection. The will to power is life's engine, and love could not be outside it. When we love, we want not only to share, but to conquer, not only to give, but also to submit. Recognizing this is uncomfortable, but liberating, because it prevents us from falling into the naivety of idealized love. This interpretation also explains love's dark side: jealousy, obsession, violence. When the will to power is frustrated, it transforms into resentment. Those who love intensely and are not reciprocated feel as if they had lost vital territory. It is as if a part of themselves had been torn away. The pain does not arise from the loss of the other per se, but from the loss of the power one believed to possess over the other. Jealousy, for example, is not just fear of losing the beloved, but rage before the possibility that they surrender to someone else's domination. Nietzsche saw in this one of love's greatest dangers, the tendency to imprison. Instead of liberating, love frequently becomes prison, because each tries to transform the other into property. Even when we say we love freely, we often desire deep down that the other has no freedom to leave us. Loving surrender in this sense is always partial. To love is somehow to want to limit others' freedom in benefit of one's own security. But there is also a higher possibility in this thinking. If we recognize that love is will to power, we can transform this power into creation, not into prison. We can desire not only to possess, but to inspire, not only to dominate, but to impulse the other to grow. Love's danger lies in reducing it to property. Its greatness lies in converting it into creative force, into space where two wills to power meet, not to annul each other, but to challenge and expand each other mutually. Nietzsche leaves us then with a crucial question. Is it possible to love without reducing the other to an object of possession? Or is love always a refined form of disguised slavery? Perhaps the answer lies less in denying power and more in accepting it, learning to direct it creatively, because after all, love is not pure surrender. It is confrontation, it is risk, it is battle of forces. To love is always deep down a battle. Nietzsche never deluded himself with the idea that love was only a source of joy. For him, love is also a prison, a dependency that feeds on suffering. If we allow ourselves to observe attentively, we will perceive that much of what we call passion sustains itself less on the happiness of encounter and more on the anguish of loss, on the anxiety of possession, on the constant fear of not being reciprocated. It is at this point that love reveals its most obscure face. It becomes addiction. Just as the addict who cannot bear to be without their dose, the passionate cannot bear the beloved's absence. Their life begins to revolve around a constant necessity, an urgency that never satisfies completely. Each message received is relief. Each prolonged silence is torment. The oscillation between pleasure and pain is what keeps love alive, and not the serene peace we so idealize. Nietzsche saw in this a kind of blackmail from life itself, so that we continue trapped by instinct. We are forced to feel pleasure and suffering as inseparable faces of the same coin. Love addiction reveals itself in the way we forget ourselves when taken by passion. The beloved becomes absolute center, ultimate reference, measure of all things. We live in expectation of their approval, suffer with their indifference, feel that our existence loses meaning when they distance themselves. This self-erasure is, for Nietzsche, a form of slavery. To love in this state is to lose one's own sovereignty, to surrender as voluntary servant in exchange for crumbs of attention and affection. And it is not difficult to perceive how this cycle of dependency repeats in our daily life. Think of someone who remains in a painful relationship, full of fights, resentments and wear, but who cannot break it because they fear solitude. This fear reveals how much love can transform into addiction. Even when it hurts, even when it corrodes, it still keeps us trapped. It is as if pain were preferable to emptiness. Nietzsche would see in this a clear example of human incapacity to face life without illusions. We choose to suffer beside someone rather than face the abyss of being alone. Love as addiction also reveals itself in repetition. How many times do we not return to the same person, even after promising ourselves we would not repeat that cycle? How many times do we accept less than we deserve just to not lose the sensation of belonging? The addict does not seek pleasure, seeks relief. And the passionate often does not seek love, seeks anesthesia against solitude. The problem is that this anesthesia charges dearly. It makes us weak, dependent, vulnerable. Nietzsche warned that this dependency is dangerous because it weakens the spirit. Instead of strengthening our capacity to live by ourselves, love addiction reduces us, makes us small, submissive, incapable of bearing life in its fullness. We become hostages of someone who perhaps does not even perceive the size of the power they exercise over us. And when we lose this someone, the void that opens is comparable to withdrawal, physical pain, despair, sensation that the world has lost meaning. But why do we insist on clinging to this suffering? For Nietzsche, the answer is clear, because human beings often prefer pain to facing nothingness. It is better to suffer in a sick bond than to see oneself alone before the abyss of one's own existence. Love, in this sense, is an existential narcotic. It gives us a reason to live, even if it is a reason that corrodes us. This leads us to a provocation. Do we really want to love, or do we just fear being alone? Do we call love what is nothing more than disguised fear? Nietzsche invites us to distrust the intensity of our attachment. The more desperately we need the other, the less we are loving and the more we are drugging ourselves with their presence. Recognizing love as addiction does not mean denying it, but transforming it. Instead of living affection as prison, we could live it as choice. Instead of seeking salvation in the other, we could learn to love them without losing ourselves. The Nietzschean challenge is precisely this: not to let oneself be consumed by love to the point of weakening one's own life. To love, yes, but without addiction. To love, yes, but with sovereignty. In the end, the great question Nietzsche throws at us is, do you love because you choose or because you need? If it is necessity, you are a prisoner. If it is choice, you are free. But freedom requires courage, and few are willing to face the solitude that this courage imposes. Nietzsche did not believe that human liberation could be born from illusion or dependency. For him, only those who face life without crutches are truly strong, who bear solitude without despair, who can say yes to existence without needing to hide it behind promises of eternal love. Love when lived as necessity enslaves us, but when we face solitude head-on, we discover a space of freedom that few have the courage to inhabit. From early on, we are taught to believe that solitude is failure. Being single, being alone, walking without company, all this is seen as a sign of incompleteness. Culture repeats to us that we need someone to be whole. But Nietzsche inverts this thinking. True failure is not in being alone, but in not bearing one's own company. Love can only be true choice when it is not used as escape from emptiness. Think of how many people enter relations not out of genuine desire, but out of fear of being alone. They remain in lukewarm bonds, endure betrayals, accept humiliations, just because they cannot imagine life without another beside them. This, for Nietzsche, is a sign of weakness. Not because loving is wrong, but because loving out of fear of solitude is denying one's own vital force. The strong man and woman, in his view, are those who can be alone without crumbling, who transform solitude into a source of creation and not condemnation. Solitude, for Nietzsche, is not a sterile void, but a fertile space. It is in it that the possibility of reinventing oneself is born, of thinking freely, of creating without ties. Those who never bore solitude hardly know what it means to be free, because they will always depend on the other to fill the silence. And those who depend do not love. They negotiate, bargain, bind themselves out of necessity. In this sense, true loving freedom can only emerge when solitude has been faced. Only those who learn to live with themselves can relate without transforming the other into a crutch. To love, then, ceases to be necessity and becomes abundance. I do not love because I need. I love because I choose to share my strength. It is a love that does not bind, but expands. Does not demand eternity, but values the instant. Does not ask for completeness, but celebrates difference. Nietzsche saw in this a superior form of love, an affirmative, creative, free love. A love that does not fear loss, because it is not born from lack but from fullness. This type of love is rare because it first requires the hard learning of solitude, and solitude is frightening, for in it there are no distractions. There is no other to blame or from whom to expect salvation. In solitude, we are before the raw mirror of ourselves. It is precisely for this reason that most flee from it, seeking in love a refuge. But flight has a price. Freedom is sacrificed, and love becomes addiction, as we saw in the previous chapter. For Nietzsche, the human challenge is to accept solitude as an essential part of existence, not as punishment, but as condition of freedom. Imagine someone who chooses to be alone for a time. At first, silence may seem unbearable, almost torture. But little by little, this person discovers they are capable of creating, thinking, dreaming, without depending on anyone's approval or company. This learning transforms. When, then, this person returns to loving, they no longer seek completeness, but sharing. They no longer seek security, but intensity. They no longer seek slavery, but encounter. Nietzsche believed that only this type of love can be truly strong, because it is not born from lack, but from abundance. Not born from deficiency, but from affirmation. It is a love that can say, I do not need you to live, but I choose to live with you now. This choice is rare, but when it happens, it is revolutionary. Nietzschean thought challenges us then to ask, are we prepared to love without fleeing from solitude? Do we bear being alone enough so that love ceases to be necessity and becomes freedom? Perhaps the answer depends less on the other and more on our own courage to face life naked, without veils, without guarantees, without anesthesia. Solitude for Nietzsche is trial by fire. Those who bear it become free, and only the free can truly love. Nietzsche never wanted only to destroy illusions. His philosophy, however hard it may seem, is profoundly affirmative. By dismantling love's masks, disguised instinct, cultural invention, will to power and addiction, he did not intend to annihilate human experience, but open space for something greater, the possibility of transforming this energy into creation, freedom, and full life. The challenge, in his view, is not to deny love, but to go beyond it. When Nietzsche speaks of the transvaluation of all values, he invites us to re-evaluate what we consider sacred. Love, clothed in romanticism and morality, became one of the greatest modern idols. Most people live as if life's meaning were in finding and maintaining a loving relationship. But if we dare destroy this idol, what remains? There remains the chance to affirm life in its totality without reducing it to a single form of experience. There remains the possibility of living not as servants of love, but as creators. This means that love, instead of being an end, should be a means of expansion, intensity, growth, but never the prison where we deposit our last hope. The true risk for Nietzsche is placing on love a weight it cannot carry, saving us from existence's pain. Love does not save, because life is greater than it. But it can propel, it can strengthen us, it can be transformed into vital force when not lived as dependency. Think of artists, philosophers, creators who, moved by passions, transformed their loving energy into works, ideas, movements. Love, in this sense, is not just relation between two people, but fuel for creation. The suffering of passion, the joy of encounter, the anguish of loss, all this can become raw material for creative life. What differs the strong from the weak is precisely this. The weak lets themselves be consumed, the strong transforms. Nietzsche believed that the superior man is one capable of sublimating his impulses, not denying them, not repressing them, but transforming them into something greater. Love, then, ceases to be prison and becomes art, ceases to be addiction and becomes creation. It is not romantic, sentimental and enslaving love, but a Dionysiac love made of intensity, risk and freedom. A love that does not cling to eternity, but celebrates the instant as if it were eternal. Going beyond love also means learning to affirm life in all its forms, without demanding that it fit our expectations. The love Nietzsche proposes is not of possession, but of celebration. It is amor fati, love of fate, of life as it is, with its inseparable pain and beauty. Those who learn to love thus do not seek salvation in the other, but companionship in existence's tragic adventure. This expanded love is not limited to people. It is love for life in its totality, for creation, for solitude, for struggle, for becoming. It is love that says yes, even before suffering, that sees meaning even in chaos, that transforms each experience into possibility of growth. By surpassing romantic love, Nietzsche invites us to a deeper form of surrender, loving not only the other, but entire life. And here is the decisive point. While we seek in human love a refuge against suffering, we remain slaves. But when we transform this force into creation and affirmation, love ceases to be prison and becomes liberation. Not liberation from pain, because pain is inevitable, but liberation from resentment, illusion, dependency. Love then ceases to be addiction and becomes potency. Nietzsche challenges us, therefore, to live more boldly. Love without needing, love without imprisoning, love without losing oneself. Use love as fuel to create, and not as justification to diminish oneself. True meaning is not in being loved, but in being creator of oneself, of one's own life, of new values. And the great question he leaves us is, are we ready to love in such a way that even if love is taken from us, we still remain full? Are we prepared to transform even the pain of loss into affirmation of life? Because for Nietzsche, this is what it means to live beyond love, to say yes to everything, including what wounds us, and transform each wound into strength. We reach the end of this journey through Nietzsche's gaze on love, and perhaps now you perceive that what you always considered sublime may be, in truth, a mixture of instinct, illusion, power, and addiction. But it is not about destroying love. It is about liberating it from the chains that imprison us. When we look at it without masks, we discover that love can be lived in another way, not as dependency but as choice, not as prison but as creation, not as escape from solitude but as expansion of life. Nietzsche invites us to rare courage, not to place on love the weight of saving us, but the lightness of propelling us. To love, then, ceases to be anesthesia against pain and becomes celebration of the instant, affirmation of existence, force that transforms us into creators. And I leave you with a question. What belief about love has most imprisoned you until today? Was it the promise of eternity, fear of solitude, the illusion of the soulmate, or the need to possess someone to feel complete? Which city are you watching from? Comment down below. If this touched you in some way, like the video and subscribe to the channel to continue this philosophical journey alongside us.